2,000 years ago one execution shook the world. Jesus of Nazareth betrayed, condemned, mocked, and nailed to a Roman cross. Behind it stood men of power. Priests who feared losing control. Soldiers hardened by blood. Leaders who wanted to keep their thrones. They thought the cross would silence him. They thought his followers would scatter. They believed his story would end that day. But they were wrong. The cross was not the end. It was the beginning of eternity. The Bible warns us. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows he will also reap. And those who took part in his death, every hand that struck him, every voice that shouted against him, every ruler who signed his fate, each one reaped what he had sown. Some met ruin. Some faced exile. Others died in despair. History remembers them and their judgment. And it all began with the kiss of a friend. Some betrayals echo through centuries, and this one began with silver. Judas Iscariot. A name forever tied to treachery. He was not a stranger to Jesus. He was one of the 12 chosen by the Son of God himself. He walked with him. Ate with him. Watched blind eyes open, lepers healed, and even the dead rise at a single word. He held in his own hands the bread that fed thousands. He saw storms obey. He heard the Sermon on the Mount with his own ears. But while his feet walked with Jesus, his heart walked another road. The Gospels tell us Judas was a thief. He kept the money bag and helped himself to it. Greed took root. And when Satan looked for a vessel, Judas was ready. For 30 pieces of silver, the price of a slave, he sold the Savior. And in Gethsemane's darkness, he came leading soldiers and guards. How would he point out Jesus in the shadows? Not with a shout but with a kiss. A kiss meant for love, used for betrayal. When Judas saw Jesus condemned, guilt crushed him. He rushed to return the silver. I have sinned, he cried, for I have betrayed innocent blood. But the priests sneered, what is that to us? They had no mercy for their accomplice. He threw the coins across the temple floor. The silver clattered, but it could not buy back his soul. In despair, Judas hanged himself. An Acts tells us the rope broke. His body fell headlong, bursting open on the rocks. The field bought with his blood money was forever called the field of blood. Judas had walked with the light of the world, yet chose darkness. His story warns us, being near Jesus is not the same as surrendering to him. But Judas was only the beginning. In the shadows of the temple another man pulled the strings. Judas betrayed with a kiss, but he was not alone. Behind him stood men in robes of power. Power can wear holy robes and still be empty inside. Caiaphas was high priest that year. The man meant to guide Israel before God. The one trusted to guard the temple and speak for the people. Yet on the night Jesus was arrested, he used his power not for truth but for blood. In the dark of night, Caiaphas broke the law he claimed to defend. He called the Sanhedrin together in secret. False witnesses were dragged in, their words twisted and weak. Still he pressed on. Finally he turned to Jesus himself. I charge you, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus answered, yes. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming with the clouds of heaven. Caiaphas tore his priestly robes, the garments meant to show holiness. With his own hands, he ripped them apart. Blasphemy, he cried. And with that act, he condemned the Son of God. By morning, Jesus stood before Pilate. By afternoon, he hung on a cross. And Caiaphas? History tells us his power did not last. Within a few short years, Rome stripped him of his office. Without his title, his influence vanished. Some say he fell into disgrace. Others say shame consumed him until death. The man who once ruled Israel's temple died with no honor. He held the law of God and yet condemned the giver of the law. His name remains in history, not for holiness, but for betrayal. Yet Caiaphas was not the only priest who thirsted for blood. Another waited in the shadows. Caiaphas condemned Jesus with his voice, but behind Caiaphas stood another man. The true power in the temple. Some men lose their titles but never their grip. That man was Annas, father-in-law of Caiaphas. Years earlier, he had worn the robes of the high priest himself. Rome had forced him out, but Annas never really stepped aside. Through his sons, and through Caiaphas, he still ruled the priesthood like a king behind the curtain. So when Jesus was arrested in Gethsemane, the guards did not take him to Caiaphas first. They took him to Annas. He wanted the first word and perhaps the last. In the darkness of that night, Annas questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. His words were sharp, meant not to find truth but to build a case for death. But Jesus answered with calm strength, "I spoke openly in synagogues and in the temple. Ask those who heard me." Annas had no answer. He sent Jesus, bound, to Caiaphas to finish the trial. But his power, like his dynasty, could not last forever. In AD 70, Rome crushed Jerusalem. The temple burned. The city fell. The wealth and family of Annas were scattered in the fire. The man who thought he controlled the house of God died watching it crumble to the ground. Annas held influence over men, but he never knew the God those men claimed to serve. But the priests could only accuse. The power to kill lay in Roman hands. The priests had accused. The guards had mocked. But only one man held the power to crucify. Sometimes the greatest crime is silence. That man was Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea. 4 years, Pilate ruled with cruelty. History calls him stubborn, greedy, even violent. Yet when Jesus stood before him he was shaken. Pilate questioned him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus replied, "My kingdom is not of this world, for this I was born, and for this I came to bear witness to the truth." Pilate found no guilt in him. 3 times he declared it, "I find no cause for death." But the voices outside grew louder. The priests stirred the crowd into a frenzy. "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Fear gripped Pilate. He feared the people. He feared losing Rome's favor. When the priests shouted, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar," Pilate broke. He brought water before the crowd. He washed his hands and said, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." But no water could cleanse his guilt. The decision was made. Jesus was scourged, mocked, and handed over to die. What became of Pilate? The Bible falls silent. But history does not. Within a few years, Pilate lost his post. He was recalled to Rome in disgrace. Exiled to Gaul, far from power, far from honor, he wasted away. Some say he was executed. Others say he took his own life, crushed by shame. Pilate looked truth in the eyes and chose fear instead. He knew what was right. He knew who Jesus was. Yet he stayed silent. And that silence still speaks. Neutrality in the face of truth is rejection. To wash your hands is not to wash your soul. Pilate feared the crowd. But another ruler laughed at the King of Kings to his face. When mercy stood before him he laughed. Herod Antipas, son of Herod the Great, the same king who once ordered the slaughter of infants in Bethlehem. Antipas inherited his father's cruelty, but not his strength. He was a ruler of Galilee, a man who had silenced John the Baptist by cutting off his head. When Jesus was brought to him, Herod's heart was not moved with fear but with curiosity. He had heard of miracles. He had heard of power. And now, face to face with the Son of God, he treated him like a performer on a stage. He hoped to see a sign, a wonder, a trick to entertain his court. But Jesus stood silent. No words. No miracles. Only truth in his eyes. Herod grew restless. His curiosity turned to scorn. With his soldiers, he mocked the Son of God. They laughed as they draped him in a royal robe. They bowed in fake honor, sneering at the idea that this beaten man could ever be a king. Herod had his chance. He had the voice of John. He had the presence of Jesus. But he mocked them both. Later, history tells us, Herod was stripped of his throne. Banished to exile in Gaul with his wife, he died far from power, forgotten and empty. Mock God's mercy, and you will be left with nothing. But Herod only mocked. The soldiers struck. Herod mocked him. But Herod did not drive the nails. That task belonged to others. For them it was routine until the earth shook. The Roman soldiers. Hardened men of the empire. They had carried out crucifixions countless times before. For them, pain was an order. Death was a duty. They scourged him without mercy. Their whips tore his back until flesh hung loose. They pressed a crown of thorns into his head, each thorn digging deep, blood running down his face. They placed a reed in his hand and bowed in mockery, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Then they spit on him, and struck him again and again. Finally, they laid him on the cross. With iron nails they pierced his hands and his feet. They raised the beam high, leaving him to hang in agony. At the foot of the cross, they gambled for his clothes, fulfilling the prophecy, "They divided my garments among them, and cast lots for my clothing." But this crucifixion was unlike any they had ever seen. Darkness covered the land. The earth quaked. Rocks split open. And the centurion, watching it all, could only whisper in fear, "Truly this was the Son of God." Some soldiers may have walked away unchanged. But one walked away believing. Yet the soldiers were not alone. A greater crowd lifted their voices sealing their fate. The soldiers struck with their hands, but the death sentence came from the crowd. The loudest voices are not always the wisest. That day, the people stood before Pilate. In one hand stood Jesus beaten, silent, crowned with thorns. In the other, Barabbas, a murderer, a rebel, a man guilty of blood. Pilate asked, "Whom shall I release to you?" The crowd shouted back without hesitation, "Barabbas." "What then shall I do with Jesus who is called Christ?" Pilate pressed. Their voices grew louder, sharper, united in hate. "Crucify him! Crucify him!" And then came the curse that echoed across generations, "His blood be on us and on our children." Within a single generation, those words came true. In AD 70, Rome laid siege to Jerusalem. Hunger stalked the streets. Families tore each other apart for food. The hills outside were filled with crosses until no wood was left. And when the walls finally fell, over 1 million were slaughtered. The temple itself, once the pride of Israel, was set on fire. Its stones torn down one by one, just as Jesus had foretold. But even in judgment mercy shone. Only weeks after the crucifixion, on the day of Pentecost, the same city that cried for his death saw 3,000 souls saved in his name. The blood they had called down in a curse became the blood that washed them clean. From betrayers, from priests, from rulers, soldiers, and crowds, their fates carried one warning. Justice delayed is never justice denied. Look at the fates of those who touched the cross. Judas' despair, hanging in shame. Caiaphas stripped of power, his name cursed in disgrace. Annas the hidden ruler, his dynasty ruined in fire. Pilate exiled to a foreign land, consumed by fear and regret. Herod mocked the King of Kings, only to die dethroned and forgotten. The soldiers, some slain in battle, others lost to time, their hands still stained with innocent blood. And the crowd their own words fulfilled as their city fell in flames, their temple torn stone from stone. They sowed rebellion. They reaped ruin. They mocked God's Son, and God was not mocked. But the cross did not only reveal judgment. It also revealed mercy. The thief who cried out in his final breath found paradise that same day. The Roman centurion, who had ordered the nails, bowed in awe, "Truly this was the Son of God." And in Jerusalem itself, priests who once opposed Jesus later fell to their knees in faith. The same cross that condemned also saved. The same blood that judged also forgave. Justice and mercy met on that hill. And both are still alive today. But their story is not just history. One day it will be yours. Empires have risen. Empires have fallen. Kings have come and gone. Yet the name of Jesus has never faded. It has outlasted armies, rulers, and nations. The cross they thought would end him became the very symbol of hope for the world. The Bible gives us a warning and a promise. It is appointed unto men once to die, and after this, the judgment. Hebrews 9 verse 27. One day, it will be your turn. You will stand before the judge of all the earth. No excuses. No escape. Only truth. Do not wait. Do not gamble with your soul. The men we have spoken of today all waited too long. They mocked. They betrayed. They stayed silent. And judgment came. But mercy is still open. The same Jesus who prayed for his enemies still prays for you. The same blood that washed the thief clean can wash you. Choose now. Run to him. Fall at his feet. His justice is sure, but so is his mercy. And the same mercy that forgave a dying thief can forgive you, today.